everybody, and welcome to my podcast, Restore, Reorganize, and Rewire, where we're going to talk about all things brains. My name is Lisa Ann DeGarcia, and in case you don't know me, I am a mom of 3 boys, 25, 23, and 16. My 25-year-old struggled most of his life with severe ADD. My 23-year-old is moderate to severely autistic with a severe language delay, so communication and language has been very much problematic in his life. And my 16-year-old, he was born early, about 5 weeks early, so we had some developmental delays because of that, but we were able to mitigate pretty much everything else based on what we learned from my older 2 children. I also was an educator in the school system for 25 years. I taught in the U.S., in Costa Rica, and in Japan on a military base. And I was a bilingual teacher. My master's degree was actually in deaf and hard of hearing, so that was the route I planned to go. So I do have a special ed background, though I wasn't a special ed teacher. And I became a math coach, and then I became a learning specialist. I was a math specialist. But what happened was I started to realize that most of the students that I had in my class or my caseload, they had a math problem, but their problem wasn't really math. They were also seeing the reading teacher, the OT, the speech pathologist. So I realized that there was something deeper in their brain going on. I had already by that time been researching a lot because to backtrack for a second, when my autistic son was 2.5 years old, that's when we started realizing, okay, something's not right. He is still not speaking. We got him officially diagnosed. So by 3 years old, my chiropractor actually pointed us into the right direction. What he said, my wife, this is back in 2003, my wife just read something about mercury in the vaccines. That's all he said. I don't know if he actually knew more or not, but that's all he said. Then I started researching, and the rest is history. So I already started learning a lot about things that were affecting the body and the gut and the mind and everything. But by the time I had these students as a learning specialist, I started realizing that something else was going on. And so I wanted to really understand about learning and brain development. So I learned all of these other educational modalities, movement modalities. I became a functional health coach because of the experience that I had as a mom, knowing that how important things like nutrition was for the brain and for chronic illness. And so basically I pretty much was learning everything about being an OT without being an OT, everything about all technology type modalities. And I wanted just to have a complete picture of everything that is needed. So if one child comes to me, maybe all he needs is some movement. Another child, maybe what they need to do is to be off of gluten. So anyway, that was why I studied everything that I did out there. So I have a little bit too many modalities out there, but that is basically what this podcast is and what I want to share with you. It's all the different things that I have learned. We're going to focus on how to reduce inflammation, because everything going on in the brain is a result of neuroinflammation. How to detox, because everything that is going on is a result of some kind of a toxic or a toxin or a toxic load. How to re-nourish the body, because one of the earliest books that I read was called Children with Starving Brains, right? Just the title alone made me realize that on a cellular level, these kids, the nutrients, they're not getting enough, things aren't working right. So they either have too much of something or not enough. So do we re-nourish the body? How do we reorganize that nervous system and that sensory integration? Because if you notice with your children, you might notice children having very weak core muscle tone, or they are rigid, or they have a lot of fine motor skills. Nobody has good penmanship these days. And then ways to rewire the brain. How do we reconnect it? And so we're just going to talk about all these topics. Now, this is not just for kids. This is whether or not you are struggling as a mom, you might be struggling with your own issues, because as we get older, I'm in my 50s, so as we get older, we are struggling with our own brain fog and some attention issues and memory issues, partly because of our toxic load. It was later onset. We didn't have such a toxic load back in the 70s and the 80s, but we have accumulated toxins, and we have a issue with our own minds. And I also, in my family, my mom's side of the family, Alzheimer's is very strong, and so I am very concerned about not having my mind forever. One of the things I've always prized myself, and maybe that it's because I grew up in a very low income kind of situation, but I always prided myself with my mind. I loved learning. It was easy for me. Memorizing wasn't always easy, but I loved learning. And so I really am trying to prevent my later years from having to not remember what's going on. I want to be able to be aware of my family. By the time my kids finally have grandkids, I want to be able to know who they are. I want to be able to take care of myself. I had a very alternative type of life. I don't really have a traditional type of retirement. So I need to be able to be productive for many years. So if that is you, this is going to be a perfect podcast for you. And if you are a parent of a child who is struggling, this is going to be a perfect podcast for you. I plan to have on guests that are going to share their own experiences. Maybe they've had some concussion or TBIs, or they've struggled and overcome some of their own experiences, or guests who are practitioners like myself who are helping other people, and they're probably doing that because they've had some experience maybe in their own family. A lot of doctors, that's usually what happens is my son had autism, and I had to figure this out, and then that's how they start helping other people. So most people are like that. So those are the types of guests that I want to have on, and so it's all things brains, and we're going to just learn how to restore, reorganize, and rewire. So what I want you to do is make sure that you follow and like and subscribe and do all that jazz. And also, if you could put in the comments below a question that you have, or it could be more than one question that you have that you really want to be answered in this series, because I want this podcast not just about me just talking about stuff. I want it to be helpful. So if there's something that you really want to know, then please put that in the comments below, so I'm sure to address it. I am so honored that you are here to follow me on my journey, and I can't wait to see you in the next episode.